We were on the Japanese island of Honshu. There were 21 of us with 3 guides on a Rhodes Scholar trip, led by guide Kathleen Aoki. We headed into the Japanese Alps. Our blossom viewing luck was holding as we saw flower-laden trees lining the roadway that followed beside rivers and passed through many small villages. We got glimpses of Japanese gardens scattered between the houses. We also began to enter various tunnels piercing the mountainous terrain.
And I think Japanese bus drivers have got nerves of steel.
5 trucks.
And there's a bus down the road that's waiting for us.
And snow.
If you're lucky, we can have a snowball fight.
We were headed for Kamakochi, the gateway to the Japanese Alps in the sacred highlands. We drove along a snow-lined road flanked with willow trees that have survived the Ice Age and into Chubu-Sangaku National Park. This is the Japanese Alps area with a height of 5,000 feet. This area is the home of the Japanese snow monkeys. Kathleen explained where we were on the Azusa River, fed by the snows of the Hataka mountain range. There were signs with pictures of the local birds and wildflowers found in the park. We walked along the river bundled in our layers of clothing, experiencing a bit of winter-style weather and the scenery of Japan. The park had only just opened for the spring season. The colors of the foliage, river, and the mountains made a perfect backdrop for a photo. There were edible mountain vegetables called butterbur sprouts growing next to the river. And bamboo grass was in abundance covering the ground next to our path. A lovely bridge, or bashi in Japanese, the Kappabachi straddles the Azusa River. This is a very popular spot in Kamakochi. We all wanted our picture taken on the bridge, so we posed with our traveling companions, Pat and Dave Lamb. Then we walked across the Kappabashi to the opposite side of the river, following behind a hiker carrying snowshoes. On the other side, we took a closer look at the materials and technology that went into this suspension bridge. It was definitely built to withstand the snow and the winds in this area. Linda went down onto the river's edge to get a different view of the Kappabachi and the beautiful winter landscape. On shore, we examined the bamboo grass more closely. Nearby, others in the park had noticed a Japanese macaque monkey in the trees. We wish we had been able to get the photos of these monkeys in the famous icy hot springs. But that area, though nearby, was too remote for our tour. It's a long hike to the area of the hot springs. No time for everything, no matter how tempting. The park has great facilities to accommodate the tours which are allowed to enter. Limited daily to 40 buses and no private cars permitted at all, the visitors find wonderful stone and timber buildings, picnic facilities, and of course, souvenir shops.
But there really is many.
Some roads in Japan require a toll. This one appeared to be completely automated and chattered away as our driver fed the machine.
Yeah, but was it just you two? Oh, was it? Only one lady was there. Yeah, with the cooking and the serving, and then she was laughing.
Now, out of the national park, we pass by more blossom-filled trees lining the road. We were all hungry, so we were grateful for a stop at a roadside rest area. Its restaurant is famous for its ramen, a Japanese noodle dish. Ramen consists of wheat noodles served in a meat or occasionally a fish-based broth, often flavored with soy sauce or miso, and uses toppings such as sliced pork, dried seaweed, mushrooms, or green onions. Nearly every region in Japan has its own variation of ramen. I watched as the ramen was prepared for our hungry group. The assembly line process shows how efficient and cooperative these Japanese cooks are in creating ramen. We enjoyed our ramen with Charles and Judy Bush from Illinois and added to the many fun experiences we had shared with them on this trip. Then into the shops of this rest area to see what was on offer. Solar Maniki Nico was there saying hello and to welcome us to shop. Our next stop was the beautiful Japan Ukiyo-e Museum. This museum is the result of a private collection of over 100,000 Japanese woodblock prints of Ukiyo-e, translated as Images of the Floating World. Woodblock art flourished in Japan from the 1600s through the 1800s during the Tokugawa shogunate. Here you can see the original version of famous prints of many illustrious Japanese woodblock artists, such as Hiroshige, Hokusai, and Utamaro. We went into a screening room to view a video explaining the process of making these prints. Traditional woodcut printing is an ancient process. 5 types of skills create these prints: picture drawing, paper making, ink making, wood carving, and printing. The handmade paper used for printing is made by first soaking the fibers of mulberry bark in a vat of clear water. These fibers produce a thick, handmade paper. This video is a demonstration of making a copy of an original print made in 1792 by the artist Utamaro. It's called A Young Woman Blowing a Glass Pipe. Glue is spread onto a specially prepared cherry wood block. A print of the picture is pasted onto the wood block. This is also the way an original drawing would be produced. When most of the paper is rubbed off, the lines of the drawing are revealed. At the beginning of the carving process, a glass filled with water is suspended next to a light source to concentrate the light for the carver as he traces the black lines on the woodblock. Fine lines are created by a very sharp blade. The carver focuses his energy on the work, and the blade brings the picture to life in his hands as he follows the lines of the drawing. The delicate carving required for the hair demands great skill. Years of practice are required to achieve this level of expertise and to carve the work of outstanding artists. All types of carving and gouging tools are used to complete the different areas of the woodblock of the entire picture. An impression is taken of this key block. The outline of the woman blowing a glass toy provides a nearly exact copy of the lines of the 276-year-old print. Then the resulting individual prints are painted to show where to carve each of the several different color blocks to print the various areas and colors to be filled in. Sometimes up to 30 or 40 different color blocks may be required for one print. In preparation for the printing process, the paper is wetted down. Special black ink is used for the printing. Coal is soaked in water for several months in anticipation of making the deep black ink. Various colored inks made from a variety of pigments are used by the artist, each on a different color block. Lighter color blocks are printed first. Various brushes are used to spread the ink on each color block. A tool called a baron is used to press the paper to the block and make the print. Each print is examined carefully. It's very important that the prints are lined up at the corners of the block with the blender markers to prevent slippage of the image. Gradually, the final image of the woman blowing a glass toy by Utamaro emerges from the hands of this woodblock printing artist. The background of this print is created using a protective shield to safeguard the image. Fine particles of mica ink are spread with a small brush, the final step in this ancient printmaking process. Back into the galleries of the museum, we explored the concrete walls of the modern building with its angular windows. Then we began a search for the most famous Japanese woodblock print of all time. Recognizable to the entire world is Under the Great Wave off Kanagawa by the artist Hokusai. It was created about 1829 and has gone on to be an icon of Japanese woodblock art. Today, mechanized prints are the rule, but the drawings continue to be impressive. Once again, we passed by blossoming trees, many wild on the hillsides, as we came into the ancient village of Narai. Narai is on the Nakasendo Way, one of the 5 official ancient highways ordered in the 1600s by the founder of the Tokugawa shogunate or dynasty. The Nakasendo Way originally had 69 post stations, each about a day's walking distance apart. Many people preferred traveling along the Nakasendo because there were no rivers to ford, an often very dangerous event. Narai was popular as a post station because it sits at the bottom of the 4,200-foot Tori Pass, and it prospered as travelers rested here, preparing for the difficult journey of crossing the pass. It began to drizzle as we passed by the outskirts of the village of Narai that straddles the old road, while we drove parallel on the modern highway. The Nakasendo was made famous in the 1830s by the woodblock artist Hiroshige and his famous woodblock series of the 69 stations of the Nakasendo Way. The ancient dirt road at the 34th post station of the Nakasendo is paved now, but many of the wooden structures that line this street are original and some of the rarest preserved examples of ancient Japanese architecture. In 1978, Narai became a Japanese nationally designated architectural preserve site, as so many of the buildings in this old post town have been kept much like they originally were during the Tokugawa shogunate. Narai is maintained by a government grant system. We walked through the village to an area called Hirasawa and arrived at the combination studio, showroom, and home of a revered lacquerware craftsman. At the small dirt-floored entry is a guest book to sign. Our group split into two, and half of us walked through and out into an ancient garden. Passing a tree in full bloom, we found Tsuyama-san. He has been working at his lacquerware craft since he was a young man and is now a highly skilled artisan. After demonstrating the creation of a wooden platter on his lathe, Tsuyama-san led us through a work area filled with the tools and supplies of his lifetime's work. No shoes may be worn in the studio. There were a series of small enclosed shelves to store shoes, and then we were offered house slippers to wear. Upstairs to another workspace.
So after he's prepared the woods and cut them to the shape he wants them, he brings them up here and he uses the lacquer. Sensei no urushi wa ima chukokusei? Yeah, and because of cost, he has switched to lacquer produced in China.
とても品質がいいです。
But he buys the best from China. There are various grades.
This lacquer is made from tree sap and can be a clear liquid all the way to lacquer with colored pigment added. Lacquerware was first developed in China about 3,500 years ago.
But he is a rather high-ranking artist, so I imagine that even with his exhibitions and things, he probably commanded a high price. So he's now taking the dust off the piece. So he's removing the dust. And again, it's 3 o'clock.
How did he learn to do this?
先生は、何年ぐらい、なんていうかな、 アプレンティスは何でしたっけ？弟子として勉強いたしましたか？
おじがやってまして、その人について。
Suyama-san's skilled hands turn the wheel, as he has for countless thousands of hours. 4 or 5 layers of lacquer, dried and sanded between each application, will be applied before that part of the lacquer-making process is completed. Back via the dirt hallway to the main part of the house, we exchanged places with the other group. The craftsman's wife greeted us. She's responsible for the display and selling of the lacquer ware. She showed me her home and the family shrines. Van and I are very interested in the arts and crafts movement that was greatly influenced by the Japanese aesthetic. This house was an exquisite example of the style. I was allowed to wander the ancient home that has grown through the generations to achieve this splendor. It's also a beautiful backdrop to display this gentle couple's lacquerware art.
Pumpkin, and the straw is spinach, and this round one in the middle, it's called, we call it devil gobo in Japanese, devil's root. Devil's root. What's the Japanese? Gobo. Yeah. And then I think this is carrot. This is probably walnut sauce, and this is probably black sesame, and this is probably from the fuki vegetable. It's a kind of grass, spring, grow in springtime, and it has a very strong flavor. This one. This is deep fried tofu, and with miso dressing on top.
After Shaki explained what was for lunch, we dug in with our chopsticks while sitting on cushions on the floor. Some asked for chairs, and they were perched above the table. We were served by the daughter of the Hara family, carrying her baby son on her back.
It was actually, I don't know if anybody Because this guy somehow moved out. That's what he told us.
We just had to explore this ancient family-owned inn at post station number 34 on the Nakasendo Way. 3 Japanese visitors sat on tatami mat and ate next to the open-air fire pit whose smoke curled to the ceiling, a design unchanged through the centuries. When we returned, we found the diners had departed. Then we discovered why.
Dolly's for.
3 generations.
Another one, please.
Because this guy somehow moved out.
In the entryway, we put our shoes back on and then said a sad goodbye to Hara-san and her historic post-station inn. Machiya, or townhouses, typically occupy deep, narrow plots, usually abutting the street, with the width of the plot usually indicative of the wealth of the original owner. The buildings are unique in that the second floor often overhangs the first, with eaves sloping farther to overhang the entire building. Tiles rather than thatch were used on the roofs, and exposed timbers were often plastered in an effort to protect the buildings against fire. Often there was a workshop or a store on the ground floor. Here at a ryokan, the Anchor Inn, you can stay for $85 a night. This includes 2 meals. We stopped for another view of the Nakasendo Way. It reminded us of the Hiroshige woodblock print with the river and the village in the distance. What a marvelous experience.
We had a new bus driver. We were off again through Honshu, headed for an exciting experience. We were taking the train to go to one of the 3 great festivals of Japan in Takayama. Actually, 2 trains. First, we bought some hot coffee at the convenience store in the station. Then we boarded for our first leg of the trip.
This is the Hida Limited Express bound for Takayama. Seats are now faced backward because we will enter Takayama line from Gifu.
自由席は1号車です。同乗車両はすべて指定席です。
We switched to a second train and we're now continuing across Honshu. This time we had front row seats. The railway system in Japan has a reputation for punctuality and safety. The train fare depends on the distance you travel as well as the type of train you want, local, limited express, express, and the type of seat, first or other classes, or sleeper. Each have a different charge. Tickets for short distances are available from ticket machines that are installed at each train station, while tickets for long distances and reservations are dealt with at ticket offices at major stations. Currently, no online ticket sales. The maintenance level is high and the extensive system of tunnels and overpasses are well kept and checked frequently. Must use the facilities. They're found at the end of each of the rail cars where the one joins the next. It's always a challenge to use this kind of WC, so hang on! Finally, we came to the outskirts of our destination and grew excited as we realized we were nearing the end of the train ride.
装束で有名な白川郷の玄関口としても知られています。ご乗車ありがとうございました。
We'll soon arrive at Takayama. Still now, Japanese tradition remains at Takayama. The Takayama Festival, which is one of the 3 beautiful festivals in Japan, is held every April and October. Thank you for using JR Sen.
The train station in Takayama has all kinds of information for visitors. We got some brochures and went to check in at our hotel. We were greeted by a cheerful porter at Takayama Uwan Ryokan. We gathered at the entrance flanked by blossoming trees and passed into the lobby, where we waited for our room assignments. This was a ryokan with a small kitchenette and a WC at the entrance. This time there were mattresses on the floor instead of futon. Out our window we looked down an old public footbath provided for travelers going along the road. We went on a walk passing ancient wooden buildings with our first stop a visit to a Shinto shrine. The gate, called a torii, symbolically marks the transition from the profane to the sacred space. I demonstrated the suzu, the round, hollow Japanese Shinto bell that contains pellets that sound when shaken to call Shinto kami, or spirits. We all walked on to the jinya, or government office, built in 1690. This is the only Tokugawa-era government office surviving in Japan. It's a national heritage site. Out front is a Zen garden where white pebbles replace water in a wave motif. Silk on the walls replicate the wave motif of the Zen garden. The importance of a room can be determined by the type of binding on the tatami mats. Those using this doorway were greeted with the finest decor, showing its importance and respect to those who entered. The local civil court was here. Judgments were made and payments of taxes were administered at this government branch office. The rabbit motif was used throughout the building primarily to conceal nails in this beautifully constructed 326-year-old wooden structure, with its adjacent gardens and drainage systems. Samurai officials worked and lived in the jinya, and there's a kitchen with the typical Japanese crocks for preparing food. This enormous conference room was used by 15 generations of samurai Tokugawa officials. Taxes paid in rice were collected, and administrators governed here, before and during the 265 years of the Tokugawa shogunate. High-ranking samurai rode in this palanquin, perhaps on the Nakasendo Way to the capital of Edo, present-day Tokyo. Out of the 60 original jinya, only this one survives. A beautiful example of ancient provincial government buildings from the Tokugawa era. We stopped for a drink next to the red Nakabachi or Naka Bridge. Blossom-laden trees cascaded next to this iconic symbol of Takayama. We had free time to wander in another historic district of town with its restaurants and shops. A model of yatai, or ornate gilded float, was on display. We'd be seeing the real thing on the parade the following day. Rabbits, another symbol of the town, were also on display, some dressed in kimono, some as samurai. You could also buy authentic samurai gear if that appeals.
Back at our ryokan, there was another yatai model in the lobby. We decided this was a good time to look at the communal baths that were located on the top floor. This time, there were private facilities with bathing for just a few people. They were open to the outside. There was also a large public bath with as many lockers, this one for the women. Back downstairs to the lobby. It was now time for dinner. Short kimono jackets were provided, so we wore ours. So had Judy and Ron Zipfel from Illinois. We teamed up for dinner.
Menus on the table, right?
Yes.
You find, so this is all original in English. So you get served appetizer in a little box. This little box is appetizer, and the menu is written in English. What are in those little boxes? Oh, good. Yes, and also.
So we guessed what was for dinner, and then looked on our list to see if we were correct. We did recognize the famous Japanese beef, this time Hida, similar to Kobe but from a different region of Japan. We were instructed to melt the miso on a leaf over our small burners and use it as a condiment with our food. Dinner also included a large buffet table with many selections, including deep-fried tempura. We ate our fill and then paused in the elevator as we went up to our room, a contented couple.
The next morning, we looked out on the footpath below and went out into town. There was excitement in the air as the Takayama Spring Festival was on. This time we went across the green Yangibashi to look down the river from both directions. Then we walked to the Katabashi, where Dave and Pat posed with flowering trees and the red Nakabashi in the distance. Then it was our turn. We made it to Takayama and the Spring Festival on a gorgeous day. We went in search of the ornate and gilded floats, the yatai. First, we saw one of the storage sheds that encloses the yatai, this one called the kinkotai. This storage shed sits right in the midst of historic old Takayama. It was time for the opening parade, so we hurried past street vendors to get a really good spot.
There's a very old tradition of dancers wearing masks that resemble animals or mythical beasts. The first record of a lion dance in Japanese texts was in 752. The style and design of the lions differ by region. There are countless lion dances in Japan, estimated as many as 9,000 variations. Flute players came after the lion dancers, then followed by the ornate yatai. Many costumes worn by the participants are replicas of various court outfits. The position of the individual is reflected by the hat and often signifies rank. The wheels on the old yatai don't pivot, so each team must negotiate the corners by using a long pole to lower and raise a rotating disc underneath. We watched as each team carefully turned this corner while musicians continued to play above on the float. The ornate yatai are covered with the gleam of ancient craft of lacquer ware. They're decorated with intricate carvings of gilded wood. The beautiful metalwork is found not only on the outside of the floats, but inside as well, and they contain gorgeously embroidered drapery. This festival in Takayama was first recorded in 1652. The origins are unknown, but because Takayama is nestled in the Japanese mountains, the coming of spring is a welcome event and a chance to beg the gods for a good harvest and for peace in the coming year. Long poles were used to push overhead wires away from the tall yatai. We were told that wires are not put underground in Japan because earthquakes cause more damage to the underground wiring than wind and other causes harm to above-ground wires. Next, we hurried over to the neighboring bridge to watch the yatai cross the Nakabashi. This is the one iconic picture we really wanted to get. It was a perfect day, and the trees in their full glory as we watched the procession cross the red bridge. We then moved on to cross the Nakabashi ourselves to find some yatai lined up down a side street. Now stationary, we could get a closer look at the intricacy of their designs and the costumes of the participants.
next event on the schedule was due to begin. We followed our map to a spot that showed a large open space. On the way, we passed a group of precious Japanese children in their blue uniforms. The large open space was completely filled with people, including photographers from news outlets. We were all awaiting the performance of karakuri marionettes, whose performance is based on kabuki and no theater. These marionettes are made of wood and silk and operated by strings and pushrod. They can require up to 9 puppet masters to manipulate the many strings made from whale baleen. After the marionette performance, we took a stroll around the gathered yatai to get a closer look at the marionettes, the lacquer work, and the sumptuous gold leaf and silk of the yatai, and also the wonderful costumes of the participants.
came across street dancers performing an ancient kyogen, a form of traditional Japanese comic theater, sometimes compared to the Italian comic form of commedia dell'arte, which developed around the same time, the 1300s. Kyogen is only performed by men and features stock characters. This dance pits a long-nosed tengu against a dragon. Otafku is the name of the female actor of this traditional pair. This couple appear in countless stories throughout Japanese history. Kyogen is very popular with street performers and, to our delight, was on display at the Takayama Spring Festival.
We took a break from the festivities, wandering the historic district, and found another storage shed for the yatai. This time it was for a float called Ibiusti, created in 1764. The sign told us the metal fittings are covered in 500 ounces of pure gold. Moving on, we saw a round globe of cedar leaves, indicating sake. There were also large, colorful barrels and bottles of sake outside the restaurant. It was lunchtime and we were hungry, so we decided to eat and then do a bit of shopping and exploring. Once more we passed the magnificent trees next to the red Nakabachi. We couldn't have had more perfect weather for this festival day. Now at last it was time for the Takayama Spring Festival Grand Parade.
Suddenly, the parade stopped. We weren't sure why, but it did give us a chance to once again get a closer look at the many Tokugawa-era clothes worn by the participants. Japanese fashion developed independently of other countries, and their traditional clothing remained in widespread use until the 1940s. The essential piece for all traditional Japanese clothes, regardless of class, begins with the kimono. By the 1600s, this had become an outer garment and was made of all types of fabric, from plain, solid cotton to heavily embroidered silk. During the 1700s, cotton cultivation had become widespread in Japan, making this the choice for everyday clothing. Weaving cloth from cotton and silk was a craft passed down from mother to daughter. It wasn't uncommon for every house to have at least one weaving loom. The obi is used to hold kimono together. The obi, a sash or belt, is often ornamental and gives information about the wearer's class, age, and even marital status. In the early part of the 1600s, the obi was tied either at the front or at the side, but by the 1770s, the obi was tied at the back due to current fashion and the ease of dealing with its ever-increasing width. The fabric used for obi varied from simple leather cording to highly decorated bands of fabric. Hats denote rank and position, with a huge variety of styles. Foot coverings, such as thong zori and geida, a zori raced on an elevated wooden base, were the footwear of the day. The outfits in this parade included those made from simple cotton to beautiful silk garments for higher-ranking retainers. There were shrines carried past as the group wound through the streets of Takayama, in hopes of a good crop and a prosperous year. Even the shogun himself was there, bringing prestige to this unforgettable parade, taking us back to historic Japan.
何こっち？
Hey. Lui, c'est celui qui est le plus cool, il se fait transporter.
Pourquoi ce monsieur a le droit à l'honneur
Merci, au revoir.
This parade was reminiscent of processions during the Tokugawa era. Those convoys wound across Honshu, often on the Nakasendo Way. Then, too, wagons carried supplies and had countless retainers leading their noble lord. That event brought esteem to those they served. This parade and festival celebrated that heritage, as well as spring blossoms, craftsmanship, and the people of gorgeous Japan.